So as we begin creating these projects, there's a couple of things you're going to need to know. And this is going to be a little bit more for higher end complex scenes, but it's something that can actually get a little confusing if you don't quite understand it. But once you do, it's really pretty simple. Now, I've got four simple objects here. I just made an oil tank, primitive, copied and pasted it, made a tube, primitive, copied and pasted it. Okay. Let's say I've got a whole series of these and I want to find a better way to group them together. One thing you can do is a new layer system. I believe this was introduced in version 10. So I'm just going to go over this quickly. If you right click on one of these, I can say add to new layer. And you can see I got a color for it. I can select the other tank. I can right click and I can say add to layer. And now let me come over here so I can make sure that's on your screen. Add to layer. You can see that it's actually chosen the orange layer by default, or I can add it to a completely different new layer. So in this case, I want to add it to the same one. If I go to a tube, right click, I can add to the same orange layer or to a new layer, and it picks a color for me. And again, I can add to now that new layer. So what does that mean? Well, if you click again and you go to Layer Browser, you have this nice little panel that comes up, and essentially, and of course you can rename these, and we can call this one would be tanks, for instance, and this one would be tubes. Okay, so you've got maybe you're building a city, and you've got west side of the street, right side of the street, east side of the street. You've got cars, you've got street lamps. You can group them all into different layers. And why is that important? Well, going with, like, for instance, solo mode, you can make one group visible, one group not. Okay, you can lock certain layers so that if you look up here, nothing gets moved by accident. You know that for sure. Like, you've built a road, you got buildings, those have to stay. You can lock that particular layer. You can just simply isolate different areas in your object manager so that you can only work on a particular thing. And again, think about a really complex hierarchy, a really complex scene. It's a great way to just work on these. You can turn off rendering for certain layers so that if you went to render, only that particular layer renders, and so on. Okay, so as the course goes on, as we need, we'll deal with some of these as needed. But it's just something I wanted to make sure you understood. And again, just like I did in the previous video, you can certainly just dock this layer browser. I know a lot of people like to work this way and just really be organized. Certainly you can create other groups here as well. You can create, like, for instance, a little null object and put these two things inside there, put these two inside there. Or you can put this whole set of layers inside another hierarchy. For instance, you've got West 59th Street, New York, and you've got the east side and the west side, and that's a layer, and that's a layer, and it all goes then into a street layer. So it can get very complex, but it's also makes your scene management a lot easier. So just a little overview on the layer system.